I welcome everyone to my channel. This channel is about complex relationships between people, what situations there are, and tells you how not to do it. We subscribe and listen to very cool stories. Natalia Sergeyevna sighed and dropped the towel wrapped around her naked body. She pushed her wet shoulder-length brown hair off her face and stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. These checkups have become a daily routine for the last 12 months. Maybe not 12 months, but certainly since she turned 45. She tilted her head, forcing her eyes to examine her naked body in the large mirror. Her face was still beautiful, but she couldn't ignore the crow's feet that had started to form on the side of her eyes. Her breasts remained very beautiful until Natalia gave birth to her daughter Irina 25 years ago, but now they were a little saggy in size 4. Of course, they were still very attractive, and they certainly bounced a lot more when she worked out at the gym 2 days a week. Her stomach was quite flat due to training, but there were a few weak stretch marks, and it was less toned than in her youth before the birth of her daughter. Tomorrow? Natalia made a mental note in her head. She would need to practice a little harder. Maybe he can lose a few more kilograms of excess weight. Her legs, although quite firm, had lost the gap between her thighs that she had when she was 20 years old. After all, what is the point of ensuring the attractiveness of your love bosom if no one is interested in looking at it? Natalia's husband Gennady rarely showed interest in making love to her. Ever since a new young girl, his secretary, started working at his company, and when she and her husband rarely made love in the family bed. Did her husband really have an affair with this young secretary? Or is it just a coincidence? Maybe her husband just wasn't attracted to her anymore. Or was he actually making love to this beautiful young secretary in his office? In fact, Natalia was not an almost law-abiding wife, but she certainly was not a 45-year-old recluse. I bet my husband has it on his desk every day. Was that all? And had there been no lovemaking between them for a long time? She could have given him everything he wanted in bed. If he wanted to be with her, she would let him make love in any form. It was intimacy that she lacked. Natalia couldn't remember the last time she had experienced something pleasant. She didn't want this during the day while she was at home. She was just sad, knowing that it was a release that her husband didn't give her, and there was no way she could get into the bathroom while he was at home to try to seduce him with her body as she once did in her youth. Shaking her head, Natalia turned to the side, and then turned her back to the mirror and looked over her shoulder. Was her pelvis slightly sagging? Of course, it was lower than when she was 20 years old. But was she lower than last month? Last week? And was cellulite visible on her? Natalia stretched out her hand, pulling on her buttocks. No, not cellulite. Thank God he's not here yet. She rubbed her eyes before bending down to pick up a towel that had fallen to the floor. I'm leaving. Her husband's scream came from the hallway of their large 5-room apartment in the center of St. Petersburg. Okay, honey, Natalia shouted, pulling on a towel. I'll be home very late, Natasha. She was going to answer, say goodbye, shout, I love you, honey. But instead she opened the drawer of the dresser with underwear. But even that made her sad. She knew that somewhere there were very beautiful underwear that she hadn't worn in over 2 years, and was now buried at the bottom of the dresser. So she reached out and pulled out a casual bra. There were some things she didn't give up on, and wearing matching underwear was one of them. A text message from Natalia's mobile phone sounded just as she pulled on her shorts. She pulled her old t-shirt over her head before looking at the text message. She liked this old t-shirt because the elongated neck didn't ruin her hair when she put it on, and it wasn't too tight. Have you ordered an air conditioning engineer? It was very hot last night, and the air conditioner didn't work well. She had completely forgotten about the call for a mechanic to service the air conditioner, who was supposed to come in this morning. She smiled at the thought. It was the same company that had serviced their air conditioner for many years, and the owner of the company, a sweet, elderly man, Viktor Sergeyevich, whose son Sergey went to school with her daughter Irina, always came to them. Yes, he's coming this morning to service the air conditioner. She put the phone in the back pocket of her shorts. Natalia closed the door of the washing machine and turned to leave the bathroom where the washing machine was. Halfway down the hallway, she heard the front doorbell ring. Opening the front door, Natalia stopped in confusion. The man on the doorstep was wearing work pants and a t-shirt embossed with the logo of an air conditioning repair company, but it wasn't Viktor Sergeyevich, whom she was used to seeing. Instead, a young man came in, tall, thin, with broad shoulders and a bright smile. "Hello, I'm from the air conditioning maintenance company," he said, and his face lit up with a smile. "Good morning," Natalia replied. "I was waiting for Viktor Sergeyevich." The young man's smile disappeared. "Of course. Yes, I know," he replied. "I meant that you were waiting for Viktor Sergeyevich." The young man nodded, and a smile appeared on his face again. "This is my dad." Natalia fell silent, staring at him intently. "Viktor Sergeyevich," he said. "It's me, Sergey. I went to school with your daughter Irina. We've been hanging out here all the time." Natalia nodded. "Yes, yes. Of course, you just look very different, Seryoza, in an adult way." Sergey smiled. "No, Natalia Sergeyevna. Do you look as cute as that?" She waved away his compliment with a wave of her hand. "Come in, Seryoza." She stepped aside, and Sergey came in the door. "I haven't been here in ages," he said, looking around. "I was just going to have coffee. Let's have coffee together." "That would be great, Natalia Sergeyevna," Sergey replied. "I'm just going to look at the air conditioning system now." He turned to the control panel on the wall, and Natalia headed for the kitchen. She had just finished pouring water into the coffee maker when she heard Sergey enter the kitchen behind her. "Natalia Sergeyevna, I think I need to get to the air conditioner that hangs from the street." "You can call me Natasha," she replied, turning to face him. "You're not 12 anymore, and you're not a little boy." Sergey smiled. "I don't know, it's weird. You are always Natalia Sergeyevna to me." Natalia shrugged her shoulders. "So it's Natalia Sergeyevna." The entrance to the air conditioner is located on the balcony above, from the fire escape. The ladder is a little shaky, so I should probably hold it for Seryoza's safety. Natalia walked past Sergey, unable to ignore the smell of his musky cologne, and headed for the fire escape. When she started up the stairs, she wanted to let him pass in front, feeling that he was at eye level, worried that he would judge her unfavorably. Climbing the stairs, she reached for the cord attached to the sunroof. Her fingertips tapped on a wooden ball that was out of her reach. When Sergey climbed the stairs, he reached over her shoulder, pulling on the rope. "I get it," he said. Sensing him behind her, Natalia jumped off her tiptoes, falling backwards into him. "I'm sorry," she said, regaining her balance, feeling a hard body behind her and feeling her cheeks turn red. Sergey didn't answer, opening the small hatch door before reaching for the rope attached to the ladder. "I'll just be a minute," he said, starting up the stairs. When he disappeared through the hatch, Natalia put one foot on the bottom step. She could hear him walking up the stairs when her phone vibrated in her back pocket. She pulled it out and scanned the text. It was Irina, her daughter, who said she would be home late after work. Sergey leaned over the edge of the hatch and looked down. Natalia was standing downstairs looking at her phone, not noticing his presence, and while he was waiting for her to finish typing, he realized that he could see how her t-shirt neckline stretched, which clearly showed all the most beautiful things. He paused, staring at Natalia's rounded breasts sealed in a bra. When she finished writing, Natalia looked up and saw Sergey's face looking down at her. Seeing that Natalia was looking up at him, Sergey suddenly realized that all this time he had been looking at her breasts hidden by a bra. "Okay, I know what the problem is," he said, looking from Natalia's chest to her eyes. Realizing that her t-shirt was bulging, giving Sergey a wonderful view of her cleavage, Natalia reached up as if scratching her neck, not wanting to admit that she saw where Sergey was looking. "Is this a big repair job?" asked Natalia, a little embarrassed by the young man's attention. "No," Sergey replied, starting down the stairs. "But I need a part that I have to order from the warehouse." Natalia held onto the rickety ladder as he went down. "Good. How long will it take for it to be delivered?" "If I order it now, it will be delivered by morning. But this means that tomorrow I will have to return to your home again, Natalia Sergeyevna." Natalia smiled. "Of course, I'll be here all day. Do you have time for coffee now, Seryoza?" "Of course, it will be great to have coffee with you," said Sergey, coming down the stairs. "I'm going to order this part at the same time." Sitting at the kitchen table, Sergey pulled out his phone, and Natalia went to the coffee maker. He looked at Natalia Sergeyevna in her shorts. Just as she turned around, holding 2 cups in her hands, he quickly looked at his phone, but not before Natalia saw that his eyes had dropped. She was silent for a moment. Was he looking at me? Had she caught him looking down at her? Sergey was a young guy. He probably looked at every girl. Natalia went to the table and sat down. Sergey was sitting opposite her and looking at his phone. "It's done," he said, putting the phone back in his pocket. "The part will be in the office tomorrow morning. They open at 8:30, so I have to be here with you right after 9. Is this normal, Natalia Sergeyevna?" "It's all right. I thought you were studying at the institute," Natalia said, blowing on a mug of hot coffee. Sergey looked at the mug in front of him and shrugged his shoulders. "I was going to do it, but my father was struggling to keep the business going, so I decided to work at our family firm." Natalia smiled sadly. "How do you feel about this?" Sergey shrugged his shoulders again. "I think it's all right. I mean, it wasn't in my plans, but sometimes things don't work out the way you planned in life." "This is a very mature way of thinking," Natalia said. "Sorry, it didn't work out that way. I'm just surprised that such a young man can think like that, especially considering the temptation of studying at the institute." Sergey smiled sadly. "I just can't bear to see my parents going through financial difficulties. Besides, if we can expand the business this year, we might be able to hire another engineer, and then I'll go to college next year." "How is Irina doing?" "She really enjoys working. I think she's glad she decided not to leave her parents. I think it would be difficult for her to study at the institute." Sergey smiled. "Yes, Irina has always been a little careful. I miss the times when we used to come here to your apartment." "It's always been interesting," Natalia replied, laughing. "It was never boring, but it was fun." "Yes, that's how it was." Sergey looked at his mug. "I was in love with you the most." It was his turn to blush on his cheeks. Natalia's eyes widened. "I'm sorry, Seryoza. I probably told you too much. She waved her hand. "Don't be silly. I am flattered by the thought that a handsome young man was in love with me." "You look great, Natalia Sergeyevna," Sergey said, and his old confidence returned. He looked at his watch. "I'd better go. I have another job, and I will try to reschedule my work from tomorrow morning to this afternoon so that I can come here first thing." He stood up. "Thanks for the coffee." "Please," Natalia said, getting up from the kitchen table and following Sergey's broad shoulders to the front door. He reached for the handle and opened the door, but stopped. "Listen, do you remember? We called you Mom, Natalia Sergeyevna?" Natalia laughed. "That's right, that's what you called me. See you tomorrow, Natalia Sergeyevna." And then he left, walking down the steps to his car. The next morning, Natalia slipped out of bed an hour earlier than usual, as she woke up early and could not fall asleep again. By 7 in the morning, she did exercises, took a shower, and, as usual, carefully studied herself in front of the mirror. The husband had already left, saying goodbye, as usual, from the doorway, saying that he would be home late. She looked at her reflection and, returning to the bathroom, picked up a razor. The smell of coffee was just spreading through the apartment when the doorbell rang. "Good morning, Sergey," she said with a smile. She was wearing her mom's uniform again, shorts and a faded t-shirt. "Good morning, Natalia Sergeyevna." Sergey was standing at the front door, holding a bag of tools and a box with an image of an air conditioner tucked under his arm. "Come in, Seryoza, the coffee is ready." Natalia headed for the kitchen, her bare feet slapping on the wooden floor. "Thank you. I'll just take it to the roof and start," Sergey replied, climbing the stairs. From the kitchen, Natalia heard a small hatch open and the ladder descend into place, and the memory of how she looked up and saw Sergey's face above her, his gaze directed down at her t-shirt, made her stop. She blinked away the image. "Sergey, your coffee is ready," Natalia called, standing at the foot of the stairs. She heard the sounds of movement and the slight clink of instruments. "Thank you, Natalia Sergeyevna. I'll be right down." "I'm almost done," Natalia asked in surprise. Sergey's face appeared above her. This time, her t-shirt was tightened around her neck. "Yes, it's a pretty simple job. Such work is carried out every 5 years or so it's pretty simple." He disappeared again. "Look down," he said, and his shoe appeared on the top step. Natalia stepped aside, still holding the coffee mug, and Sergey came down the stairs with a tool bag in one hand and an empty box and packaging in the other. When he reached the floor, he turned around. Natalia looked up at his handsome face and beaming smile. "Was it really the same boy who hung out at our house?" laughed and ate at our place? Suddenly she realized that he was looking at her. She held out a coffee mug, but Sergey only smiled, looking at his tools and packaging. Okay, I'm sorry, she said, a little embarrassed. We'll do it in the kitchen, coffee. We'll drink it in the kitchen. I'll just put this thing in my car and come back. Standing with her back to the kitchen counter, Natalia took a deep breath. What the hell was that? I mean, he's good looking, but he's only 18. Why are you so worried? The front door opened behind her. Sergey entered and sat down at the kitchen table, where Natalia had left coffee. She reached for her mug and sat down on a stool perpendicular to him, but stopped, feeling awkward because of the proximity, and backed up against the wall. So how do you want me to pay you, Seryoza? She asked, immediately regretting her choice of words. I mean, do you want cash? Or transfer money to the card? Natalia Sergeyevna will be billed to you, said Sergey, grinning. I will issue an invoice tonight and send it to you by email, and you can pay it online. That's right, Natalia replied. I guess I'm a little behind the times. I'm getting old, alas. Sergey's smile disappeared. You are not old, Natalia Sergeyevna. You are a very nice young man, Natalia replied, smiling. He caught her eye, but she turned away. So where's your next job? She asked, looking up again. I don't have any more calls today. Well, that's good for you. Your weekend can start right now. Sergey shrugged his shoulders. Probably, but I like to be busy. Besides, we need to develop the business. Natalia looked at him, a strong, confident young man. I'm sorry, it probably bothers you a little. He nodded. You know, when I saw how sad you looked, I remembered how you fell off the porch as a child. Irina brought you, and I hugged you. Although I'm not sure hugs can fix it. Well, you never know, Sergey said, looking up, and his old confidence returned. I'm not sure that would be appropriate right now. Probably not, he replied. Well, I guess I should go. But instead of getting up, he looked at Natalia. Noticing something in his young, sparkling eyes, she took her place at the table. Pushing back the stool, Sergey stood up. I was glad to see you again, Natalia Sergeyevna. And if you have any other job, I hope you'll think of me. Of course I will, Seryoza. And I will share your details with my neighbors and friends. Thank you. I will be very grateful. He looked at her, smiled, and went to the door. Seryoza, wait, she said, coming up to him. It was nice to see you again. She hugged him. There was a moment's pause, and then he put his arm around her waist and hugged her. She recoiled, but he held on a little longer, still hugging her waist. Natalia looked up at him. Are you all right? She asked. You're as pretty and beautiful a woman as I remember. Thank you, Seryoza, but I'm also married. I know, I just wanted to tell you. I'm very flattered, but I'm old enough to be your mother, she said, but she knew her arms were still around him. But that doesn't stop you from being an attractive woman. She looked down. Seryoza, I am? I really think you should leave, she said, feeling very unsure of her words, taking her hands off his shoulders, but only up to his sinewy biceps. Natalia didn't need to lift her head to realize that he was leaning towards her. Seryoza, don't. He stopped, but his arms continued to wrap around her waist, looking down at her. She slowly raised her face and looked at him. I'm very flattered, but what? But I'm married. I'm sorry. I can't do anything about how I feel. I know, but that would be wrong, she said, her heart pounding in her chest and her neck turning red. Sergey was silent, looking down at her and not taking his eyes off her. He gently brushed back the stray hair that had fallen over her eye, and his face moved to her face. Seryozenka, Natalia whispered. Don't make me do something I'll regret later. I'm not going to force you to do anything. If you tell me to stop, I will stop. He was silent for a moment, but when she stopped protesting, he leaned closer. Natalia felt her breathing quicken. The blood was pounding in her ears. Her legs were weak, and butterflies were flying in her stomach. Sergey's lips touched hers, gently at first, and she closed her eyes, and she realized that she was trembling when Sergey's hand moved up to the back of her head, and then to her hair as his tongue slid between her lips. Suddenly she pulled away. Seryoza, I can't, she said, stepping back, and her hand moved to her mouth, as if she could wipe his lips from hers, and ran her fingers through her hair. "I'm sorry, Natalia Sergeyevna," Sergey said, rubbing the back of his head. "I have to go now." He turned to the kitchen door. "Seryoza, wait." She wasn't going to stop him. She didn't know she was going to say anything. The words just burst out of her. The young man stopped and turned to her, closing the distance again. "Seryoza, I am?" But before she could finish her sentence, he reached out to her and pulled her to him, pressing his lips to hers. "Seryoza," she whispered, tearing her lips from his. "What are we doing? What are you going to do?" Sergey's lips moved down to her neck, and despite her uncertainty, she tilted her head to the side. "I want to make love to you, Natasha," he replied, and his breath made her neck and shoulders crawl. "Seryoza, kissing is one thing, but I can't go that far." But despite her protests, Natasha felt her resolve weaken as the handsome young man continued to kiss her neck, moving closer to her ear. "Don't do this," she moaned softly. "Oh, my God. What he's doing to me." "Is that what you mean?" he asked, gently kissing and licking the tender flesh behind her ear, down her neck and back. "This is bad," she whispered. "It's okay," Sergey said, pressing his lips to her ear. "No, it does not affect. But that's still the case." "I want you, Natalia Sergeyevna," he whispered again. "I know you know, but we can't." "Yes, we can. I want to make love to you." Natalia sighed. Natalia's fingers dug into his hard back as she listened. "I want to kiss you while we make love." "Seryoza, stop," Natalia whispered, but found herself biting his shoulder. "No, we can't. I can't make love to you in my bed." He broke away from their kiss and looked at her. "But will you make love to me?" "No, no, that's not what I meant." She looked down, but Sergey's fingers lifted her chin, and he kissed her again. "Seryoza." She felt his hands begin to lift the hem of her t-shirt. "No, Seryoza." Natalia pressed her elbows to her sides. "Why not?" he said softly, pressing his lips to hers. "Because I'm not perfect," she replied, imagining herself in front of the mirror every morning. "You're for me," the young man said, lifting her t-shirt, feeling the resistance of her arms weaken as she let him lift them over her head, exposing her stomach and then her breasts encased in a bra. He dropped the t-shirt on the floor behind her, bent down to kiss her lips, neck, shoulders, bra strap before starting down the material of the bra. Natalia was worried, and confusion overwhelmed her, torn between not wanting him to stop and feeling guilty for cheating on her husband. Sergey's mouth reached for the cup of her bra, but she moved her hands to the sides of his face, preventing him from sinking lower, despite her growing need for continued sensations. Sergey's tongue moistened the material as he tried to lower it to her breasts, which were covered with cotton and lace. Natalia shuddered from the warmth and realized too late that his fingers had grabbed the button of her shorts and unbuttoned it. "Seryoza, we can't do this. We have to stop immediately." "Is this really what you want?" he asked, unzipping his shorts. "Let me take you to bed," he said, pressing his lips to her breasts. "No, Seryoza. I don't want it to happen on the floor. I want it to be comfortable. I can't, not in my bed." But his fingers slid down the seam of her panties, lower and lower, until they pushed between the back of her thighs. Natalia knew she was wet, and the thought both excited and embarrassed her. Suddenly his hands moved, and he took her, leading her from the kitchen to the bedroom. "Sergey, what are you doing?" she asked, still allowing herself to be led. He didn't answer and led her to the bedroom. She considered protesting again, but instead allowed herself to be led. They reached the bedroom, and Sergey pushed open her bedroom door. "No, Seryoza," she replied. "I can't. Not here." He stopped, turned to her, kissed her again. His arms wrapped around her, and she kissed him back, enjoying the feeling of his firm but gentle grip. She grabbed the back of his head, pulling him closer to her, and felt his hands move to the clasp of his bra. A moment later, she felt him unbutton and release. The pressure on her large breasts disappeared. She tried to press her arms to her sides, still holding his head, but he easily slid the straps down her shoulders, exposing her breasts, her flesh pink with excitement. "I want you, Natalia Sergeyevna," he said, moving closer again to kiss her, and when she did not protest, he took her hand and pushed the bedroom door open again. "No, not there," she said, stopping. She turned, pulled on his arm, led him down the hall, and pushed open the door opposite. The guest room was smaller but tidy, but obviously it had not been used for a long time, and the bed was unmade, only a bare mattress. He turned and looked at her. "Not on the mattress," he said, leading her back into the next room. "No, this is Irina's room." "We can't," Natalia said and, walking down the hallway, pushed open her bedroom door. Sergei followed her into the bedroom. Alarm ran through her body as he looked at her face and body, and she almost rushed to the door. He bent his head to kiss her, and she let him, guilt and arousal mingling in her mind as she let her body take pleasure. Releasing her back, Sergei pushed her to the edge of the bed while they kissed. "Wait," she breathed, breaking away from their kiss and pressing her forehead against his chest. "I don't know if we should do this." "We have to do it," Sergei replied. "But I'll stop if you want, Natasha." Natalia did not respond. Her lack of response was her agreement. "Go to bed, Natasha," he whispered, bringing her out of her reverie. She resisted for a while, but knowing that she had most likely passed the point of no return, she sat down on the bed and went over to her to put her head on the pillows. Sergei was standing in front of her, and at that moment it occurred to her that he was still fully clothed, and she thought that this was his plan from the very beginning, to undress her and then leave her there in poverty, but with relief that she had not committed the final betrayal of her marriage. But when he started to lift the t-shirt, she realized that this was not the case, that there was no delay, that it had to happen. She knew she could stop him. She was sure that if she told him to stop, that they had gone too far, and that he had to leave, he would leave. But she knew she wasn't going to do it. She was going to let it happen, and that she would have to find a way to deal with it later. Natasha watched as Sergei took off his shirt, and his tan skin under it stretched over taut, sinewy muscles that appeared only as a result of youth. Stepping forward, he knelt on the bed. His gaze roamed over her face and body, and she wondered why he needed a 45-year-old mother with a bunch of flaws when he could choose from beautiful girls his own age. When this thought occurred to her, she shyly crossed her legs and folded her arms across her chest. Natalia froze, knowing that this was the last moment of fidelity to her husband, the moment when she would allow another man to take her, and she tried to convince herself that she would not have done this if she did not think that her husband was doing the same with his young secretary in his office. And why not? Her question was tinged with sadness. She wondered if he had reached a climax because she had not aroused and satisfied him enough as a woman. "Because I don't want our lovemaking to end. I want to take you from behind," Sergei said, looking down at her. Natalia looked at him, and uncertainty froze on her face. "I don't know," she replied softly. "Why?" "Because I'm really shy about my body, and I don't know if I want you to see me like this. I think you have an amazing body, and I want to make love to you in all possible ways, Natasha." Looking into his eyes, she saw the sincerity in him and nodded to indicate that she was not against his proposal. "Don't look at me," she said, turning her head slightly. But she knew that she had made a demand that he would never agree to, so she agreed, lowering her head onto the pillow, trying to hide her face. Natalia's face sank into his neck as she tried to catch her breath. It was amazing. Now Natalia ran her fingers over his hands more slowly, more tickling, and they lay there for several minutes. "Serioza," Natalia whispered. "Maybe you should go home already?" She lifted her head to look at him. "I'm sorry," she said, "but the husband and daughter can return home at any time." But even as she said it, she knew that, especially for her husband, it wasn't true. Sergei nodded, but immediately stopped. "Can we do it again?" Natalia closed her eyes. She could still feel him inside her, though not as much as she had a few minutes ago. "I don't know," she replied. "We shouldn't have done that this time." "Didn't you like it?" asked Sergei. "Of course. It was amazing. You're an amazing lover, but I'm married and I have a daughter." Even as she said those words, she couldn't help but think that once he was gone, she would want him again. But that was all there could be, liberation. And could she really have done it? She didn't know, but the thought of being in this situation again turned her on more than she wanted to admit. Natalia reached out and grabbed his face. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that we have to be careful in our relationship. Sergei dressed quickly and tried to kiss her goodbye, but it was also a betrayal of her marriage, and therefore she did not let him. But still, standing in the shower with her discarded clothes and bed linen, which were part of their lovemaking in the washing machine, she knew that she wanted Sergei again. And why not? Her husband was not interested in her. Their 2-minute contacts every 2 months, which left her unsatisfied and sad, were nothing compared to what she had just felt. And although she didn't know how it would work, and that it would probably end with him either finding a girl his own age, she knew she wanted him again. As she stood under the water, washing off Sergei's scent, she began scrolling through scenarios about how it might actually work. Standing in the kitchen with a bowl of salad on the table next to her, Natalia jumped when the front door opened. For a moment, she thought it was Sergei coming back, but she froze when her husband entered. What is he doing at home so early? Did he know what had happened? No, he couldn't. How could he know? She watched him walk towards her, and in a moment of panic, she did not see the flowers in his hand, nor the bottle of wine hidden under his arm. She blinked when Gennady smiled at her. "Darling, I need to talk to you," Gennady said, handing her the flowers. Natalia was silent, wondering if he was going to confess to the affair that, in her opinion, he had with his young secretary. "I know I've been a little distant from you lately, dear," Gennady said. "Well, very far away, and that I worked a lot, and our personal life was, well, I didn't have enough, but there was a good reason for that. I don't work late, like I said." "Well, yes, but not only in the office." Natalia stared at him, not understanding where his conversation was heading. Gennady put the bottle of wine on the table and pulled the phone out of his pocket. "I've been working on this," he said, showing her a photo of a country house by the sea. "What is it?" she asked in confusion. "This is our new country house," Gennady replied, smiling. "I wanted this to be a surprise for you. I supervised the design and construction." Natalia stared at him with her mouth open. "You've always said that you'd like to live by the sea, and I thought that since our daughter Iraka will probably move out in the next few years, this is the right place for us to start the next stage of our life together." However, Natalia didn't say anything, unable to form a sentence. The words he was saying mixed up with the visions of Sergei's face. "I love you, Natalia. I've always done and always will, and I just want to make you happy." Gennady was smiling at her. "And what do you think? Can we move into our new home?" Natalia nodded, smiling. "Yes, yes, of course. I love you too. I thought you left me. I thought? Gone? You are the most attractive, most beautiful woman in the world, and you have given me a wonderful life. I'm really sorry that last year I was so tired of organizing this and also running the business, and I was afraid that if I spent too much time with you, I would give you a surprise." And then he kissed her, hugged her tightly, and she reciprocated. And, pulling away, he spoke again. "Sweetheart, I've booked a table for us at your favorite restaurant. So why don't we jump in the shower together before we get ready for the restaurant?" Natalia nodded, smiling at him. "Tell me, what did you do to your neck?" Gennady asked. "What do you mean?" "There, on the neck, it looks like a burn or a rash." And when her husband opened the wine, Natalia turned to look at her reflection in the glass cabinet. Her fingers touched the small bite mark left by Sergei's teeth.